And I would suggest in final conclusion that there's a lot at stake in this, for the quality of our remembering will be directly linked to our sense of agency and our understanding of other people, or in other words, the quality of our remembering will be directly related to the quality of our freedom and to the depth of our love.
Thank you so much. Why don't we thank the panel? Thank you so much to all of you. I would like to invite questions from the audience before I send you off to the cookies outside. So if anyone has questions for any of the panelists. Chandra? Well, I like this one because having studied dance before, a lot of the history of people who do not have writing or did not, a lot of the history of people who didn't have access or did not use writing as a way of recording history was bodily memory, and so was inscribed in ritual, and dancing was one form of it. And so I do know that in Africa, dancing is a record of some of the things that happen, but as Shirley mentioned, ritual is also a form of remembrance. So limping is not a metaphor that is attached just singularly to, let's say, the Western historian. In fact, it's a very, anthropologically, it's something that is applicable to a range of societies to speak of people who put the dead and the living in communication with one another, and it's in part what historians do, but dancing and different rituals also are commemorative in character, so maybe that's one image you could possibly use to think about history across cultures.
As I look at Marianne's categories, the one that strikes me as the most applicable, or one that has really impressed me in reflective Christians elsewhere in the world, and I think especially of Africa, where I visited the most, is this idea of the stroll, the walkabout, seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. And several things go into that, but I think one of the things it does is a worldview that says that what we Westerners might think is very ordinary is in fact extraordinary, or that the extraordinary happens within the world we daily encounter every day. Andrew Walls talks about this, saying that Western post-Enlightenment's worldview is just too small for many theologians he's met in Asia and Africa. That their worldview in many respects is much more receptive to the biblical worldview that has these great panoplies of the living dead, the living church, the martyrs, the saints, all of the a world populated with beings and with personality and with force. That Westerners, by and large, if they're humble, they say, we just don't sense it, but more likely they say these things just don't exist. And so the stroll And I like the image of the stroll too. It's not the fast ride down the hill in Charlie Farhadian's new Mercedes. It's which I just had. It's a lovely car. He said he got it on Craigslist. But no, it's a way of living and a pace of life that puts you more in touch with the extraordinary world around you.
Any other questions? Yes.
The Lewis quote? Yeah, let him have a chance at it now.
Now, this you can find it in the one volume of essays, The Weight of Glory, and this is from a sermon that Lewis gave. It's called Learning in Wartime, and it was a chapel address he gave in the autumn of 1939, as Europe is going to war. It's a sermon preached in the Church of St. Mary the Virgin in Oxford. And essentially, Lewis is answering the question, isn't it like fiddling while Rome burns to be here in these halls of learning? Shouldn't we be out on the battlefields right now? And essentially, he's saying, if we give up on this freedom-giving, liberating exercise, then the enemy is won. You know, that's one of the things we are fighting for, and we need to preserve. And his other point is that we're always at war. It's ongoing, but this is what's before us, and it is deeply valuable. And he counted the ways, and then one of these ways, right towards the end, he says, most of all, perhaps we need intimate knowledge of the past. Not that the past has any magic about it, but because we cannot study the future, and yet need something to set against the present, to remind us that periods and that much which seems certain to the uneducated is merely temporary fashion. A man who has lived in many places is not likely to be deceived by the local errors of his native village. The scholar has lived in many times and is therefore in some degree immune from the great cataract of nonsense that pours from the press and the microphone of his own age.